Alright, we're all set up to melt our cemented silver into shot. Our furnace is heating up. It's going to take a few minutes before it's up to temperature. I think we need to get up to 961.8 for silver. This is the melting temperature, so we need to surpass that. Celsius. As it's heating up, I'm going to start to put in our cemented silver. And anytime you're working with molten metals, you definitely want to take precautions. I'm going to be wearing a face shield. I have my extra layer on, multiple layers. Good welding gloves, but you definitely have to protect yourself. If your cement silver has any moisture in it, if that goes into the furnace, that can cause an explosion. So you have to make sure that your cemented silver is completely dry. You definitely don't want to mix these two. Alright, well, I'm going to start putting our cemented silver in our crucible here. It's easier for me just to lift this up. And no matter how well I rinse this silver, no matter how many times I wash it, I'm still going to have residues of the acids that we used. Metals burn and give off fumes as well. Don't touch that later. In a few minutes I would burn my glove. So as this heats up, I need to have airflow, so I'm going to turn the fan on now. And I think at this point it's just a waiting game, so there's not much to do until this gets up to temperature. So I'll pause the camera and fire it back up when we're ready. Alright, we're past our melting point. We can add some more of our cemented silver. Alright, we'll let that get back up to temperature. The temperature is actually gonna start falling now that we put that new material in there. So we'll let it acclimate, come back up to temperature, and we're gonna start to pour this off. Alright, we are up to temperature, and we are ready to pour our metal into shot. Alright, and we'll reload it right away. Hope I didn't miss the camera angles up too bad there. But I really got to focus on what I'm doing. pull this forward a touch. Alright, let's let that heat up. When it melts down, I'll add the rest and we'll pour it off. I did it one-handed there to keep my arms out of the way of the camera, and hopefully it didn't work against me. Might have a few big chunks to melt back down again. I'm going to let this heat back up. There's a little bit left that needs to be poured out. We'll take care of that, and then scoop our shot out and see what we got. That was that. Alright, I'm going to go pour this off, get our shot. I'll be right back. Well, here we have it. Our dried silver shot. Nice and shiny. Looks pretty good. Ideally, these are the type of pieces I'd like to have. Small, you know, all this little stuff, you know, ideally that's what I'd like to have. But I had a couple heavy pours which produced this wire type of shot. I don't know if you can call that shot, just wire. I had a couple heavy pours there. I got to get used to working around that camera. Still, it'll fit in our basket just fine. I think it'll, yeah, it crushes up and bends just easy enough, so it'll be just fine. I threw a couple big chunks in a previous little batch that I ran, and man, it rotted away. It dissolved away much faster than I thought it would. Alright, so that leaves us to the next step. I'm going to get the silver cell set up, and I don't know if you saw in a previous video that I did some silver, and I set up a small silver cell. And I'm going to do that one again. That thing worked out so good, I barely had to use any electrolyte. And this is a pretty small batch as well, so it should run fast, and we should get some pretty good results. And I'm I'm going to run it twice. I have a used electrolyte that I'm going to start running this shot through when it becomes exhausted. You know, in the previous video, I believe I said the solution becomes exhausted, the electrolyte, when it ends up with approximately 80 grams of copper in solution. I'm wrong. That was me just talking to myself practically. The real answer is 50 grams. When it gets close to 50 grams per liter of copper in your solution, that's when you're going to start to plate out copper over your silver. That would not be pretty. So, but the last electrolyte that we used was pretty clean. It was a real fast batch. So we'll set up with that again. You'll notice it has some color to it. And after we run this material through the silver cell once with that solution, that old reused electrolyte, we're going to mix a fresh batch of electrolyte and then run the batch through another time. And if all is well, then after we run it through the second time, our clear solution should pretty much remain clear. You know, it should remain clear if the first pass did its job. So let me go get set up and we'll get to it. We're all set up. This is our basic little silver cell. I posted a series of videos already on my channel, kind of explaining this little system that I got. Not in great detail, but this is my new mini silver cell. It worked out really well last time. It had a small batch, maybe about half the size of this, maybe even less, I forget. But burned through it real quick. I thought having such a small surface space on my cathode that perhaps it would take a little longer. I know it's most of the time it's all about the amperage, voltage that you run through this, but I thought, well, limiting the surface space, it's still going to mess with it. And plus I had a smaller basket, and I thought, oh, it's going to take forever, but it ripped through it lickety split. I guess it's all about the current. But yeah, well, let's see. You can see this little basket. One thing that I did is, one modification that I changed is I didn't drill any holes. Here's the one I used last time. I have the holes all in the bottom so the fluid can get in there. However, as you can see, there's some coloration there. Some fine sediment does work its way through the filter, and it settles in the bottom. And when I pull it out, it kind of flushes itself out. So one modification that I have made that I want to try, and I just put the holes here, nothing in the bottom. So whatever does settle is just hopefully will remain there, and hopefully the filter will catch it all. But if it doesn't, it's going to kind of remain there for the most part and not pour into our solution. So these little guys work great. This is the typical size that I would use for my silver cell. Let's show you. So this is my new mini, and this used to be my small silver cell for running smaller batches. However, I got to use twice as much electrolyte to run this one compared to. Give me a second to grab it off the shelf here. I don't know if this will fit in the view of the camera actually, but compared to this one, this is the normal silver cell that I would be running with on a big row. Yeah, I can't even fit it in there, but you get the idea. So, but that big bowl, that big cathode uses a lot of electrolyte. So and to make the electrolyte, you need silver, and that's fine, but then you have a ton of silver that's just in solution. And in the end of the process, having all that electrolyte, you gotta cement the silver out, and then you're left with, 600 grams of cement silver that you gotta work out. This way, I'm left with, just a few hundred. I don't have the math worked out in my head, but let's see. The solution that I mixed up last time was 140 grams of silver per liter in solution. And I fit about 1.5 liters, 1.4 liters of solution in this bowl. So, and then now I'm only working in 210 grams of silver. So that's a lot. I'd rather have that little bit of cement silver laying around, and instead of all the other stuff. Much rather have silver crystal. All right, we're 4 minutes into this and I haven't started, so let's just get right to it here. I'm gonna pull this over to the side. I have some spent electrolyte that I used last time. It looks a little bluer on the camera than it does in real life, but I would like to use this up until it's exhausted. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get through the whole run with this solution. It really depends on the level of impurities that are in the shot. Give me a second, let's fill this up. This doesn't have a ton of life left to it, but there's still some. So I might as well utilize it. And when that becomes exhausted, we will mix up a fresh batch and run our silver through that batch. Ideally, if it all works out perfect, I'd love to run this whole batch through this solution. That'd be fantastic. And then we'll mix up that fresh batch and run the crystal that we pull out of it again through, just to guarantee our 3/9 fine. Running it through twice pretty much guarantees it for 4/9 fine, but I don't have the capabilities to test for that. 3/9 fine is what we have. So here's a makeshift top I made. It's clear plastic, so you can kind of see through it, but not as good as like plexiglass. I think next time I think I'm going to mold something different. But for demonstration purposes and all in what? I don't know. For demonstration purposes, this is going to work. All right, let me let this soak through here. Take it slow just so I don't push the volume of solution over the sides. I guess it's not that big to do, but all right. As you can see inside, it's soaked right through. Nice little wet basket here. Next, let's load it up with some of this shot that we got. I'm gonna, like I learned when I was a kid, Lincoln logs, you want to put the big ones in first. So I'm gonna drop these tall guys in there. Our silver wire, we can watch that dissolve down. Lincoln logs. It's pretty much the bulk of the wire, I think. Now I'm going to get some of the small stuff just to fill in the gaps. Please don't drop in there. Silver looks pretty clean, but it is not 3/9 fine. That I would guarantee. So, we're using a stainless steel bowl for our cathode. We also need an anode, which this thing has gone through more than 6 batches already, and it's holding strong. This I created when I first got started, just out of cement silver. So yeah, so essentially I could just let it run right through. It was a cement silver that I dropped out of an electrolyte, so it's fairly clean. It doesn't look like it now because it's got some slimes on it. But all right, next step is to attach the negative clips here. Got to stick it through first, and I made 2. I'm not saying that you need 2, but it just makes sense. All right. For the anode, just got it. We don't have to bury it in. The silver is so conductive that we can just let it rest on top, and it's going to do its thing. So I'm going to add the positive. The only thing I do want to make sure is that it doesn't fall out. As this stuff, as the silver goes into solution here and plates out onto the bowl, it'll sink down. This will fall down into it, so you want to keep an eye on it. All right, let's do a quick once over. What I do have here is this is silver nitrate as well. This is electrolyte, and you see how crystal clear it is. This was made out of crystal. This batch was only 126 grams per liter. However, I was saving it for something, and that experiment's done, so I'm just going to pour that right into here now. Trying not to knock just to add a few grams of freshness to it. All right, let's think about this here. We're all plugged in. Connections are made. Negative, positive, anode, electrolyte, shot. We're all set. It's that simple. So all we do now is turn the power on, and I'm not sure how good you're going to see it through this thing. I can see fairly well, but the camera doesn't seem to pick it up as good. But within moments, we're going to start seeing some tiny little crystallization on the bowl. All right, let's do it. This is going to work its way down and level out. But here we go. And it's live, that's that. Now we just got to let it do its thing. I'll be checking on it periodically every few hours, just to make sure when the electrolyte does start to fail, it seems the crystal growth gets a wispy, almost to the point of maybe strands of a Brillo pad, the steel wool. So you want to avoid that, because that stuff grows like vines up towards your anode, and makes it to the basket, grows through the basket or through the filter, touches and makes a connection with the silver, and boom, you just popped a fuse. You just burned a hole through your bag. Whatever slime is in your filter can leak through. I have had that happen, but I haven't had a big burn hole or anything like that where the stuff just poured out. But whatever, you got to toss it and start over again. So we'd like to avoid that. So I will be watching it closely over the next few hours, just to make sure that electrolyte's clean enough. I already see some crystal growth starting to sparkle. Be great if you could pick that up, but nothing else. I'll get a closer view in a little while. Whew, it's hot in here today. I'm gonna go open some doors up. Let's let that do its thing, and I'll cut back with the camera in a bit. Well, we're about 24 hours into our process here. You'll notice that we have some nice, thick crystal growth along the upper crust of our solution. See if we can just knock a little bit off so you can get a perspective of it. Nice and heavy, drops pretty quick. You'll notice down towards the bottom of our solution, crystal growth is quite a bit more wispy. Elongated. However, it's still heavy enough that it keeps breaking off and dropping to the bottom. It's not growing up towards our anode yet. So I think we're still good. We're about 2/3 of the way through our silver shot. And hopefully, the way the color's going, it hasn't severely changed. So I think that we're going to pull it off. I think we're going to get all the way through before this electrolyte is exhausted, and we'll complete running this batch. Well, we'll completely run this batch with any luck here, and then when we're done, we'll mix up a fresh electrolyte and run it through one more time. This is going pretty quick. This little bowl creates a little bit more heat than what I'm used to, so I'm monitoring that. And the basket is so small that it depletes itself. It empties pretty fast, so that has to be maintained and at least peeked in on and checked every 2 hours. So that's one downside about using that tiny basket. But everything's looking good. Good crystal growth. Alright, well, I'm going to put it all back together and we're going to keep working. We're going to get this batch done. Well, we're about 3/4 of the way, a little bit better than 3/4 of the way through our silver shot. Our crystals have grown, coming along quite nicely. Our solution is definitely taking on a bit of color. We should still be good. If my math is correct, we should still be holding strong here. However, it's starting to get pretty full. It's I'm just worried that it's gonna start to grow, maybe get wispy, whatever it's gonna do. I think since I'm pushing this electrolyte, I'm gonna harvest the material that we have in here right now. And if at some point I messed up and our solution does become exhausted and it starts to plate out copper, I don't want to wreck the whole batch, so I'm just going to remove this silver, clean it, wash it, and then we'll start fresh. Alright, so let's get to it. I think I'm going to empty our electrolyte out into this beaker here. Might be a little out of camera shot, but we need to... we should be alright. It's okay if some of the silver pours in there. I don't think it has yet, but if some does, it's alright. It's going to go right back in here. We'll try to get the vast majority out. And I'm going to rinse this off real quick. We'll see what we're looking at here. Looking gorgeous. Nice and bright. Looks great. Give it a quick rinse here. Get the vast majority of our solution out. It's alright if we add a little bit of water to it. There has been some loss due to evaporation. And when it evaporates, it's mostly just H2O coming out of there. The rest of the molecules stays saturated in the fluid. I think that'll do it. And we'll swap this out, get it out of our way. Definitely has a bluer tinge to it. I'm sure somebody's come up with a way to determine just by color when it's exhausted. I know it can get quite a bit bluer than that though before it does. Alright, give me one moment here. Start scraping this down here. My kids have those, I don't know, fidget spinners and squeeze balls and things like that. My daughter's always playing around with them, telling me how satisfying it is. I get it, but this is one of those things where I find very satisfying. It feels good to scrape these crystals off. I'm just using a plastic squeegee. I believe this is the quality Pamper Chef brand. And no, Pamper Chef does not sponsor my video. Well, I'm estimating we still have about 350 grams to go. So this would leave us with a good 600 plus grams right here. Good size crystal growth here. I'm looking at the camera screen and it's so bright white it washes out, but in reality it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous bright white silver. All these different size crystals, different shapes, beautiful. Hope it ends up picking it up half as good as what it looks like in real life. All right. Now I'm gonna have to heat up some water. We're gonna wash. There's still plenty of electrolyte mixed into this crystal, so we want to wash that off and get that nice and clean. I don't have to worry about getting it perfect at the moment because we are going to recycle this through the silver cell again. So if there is some trace of electrolyte solution on there, that'll be okay. It's going to get put right through. However, if that electrolyte is blue, that means it has some copper in it. It has some stuff that if I do introduce that back into the system, you know, it's going to change the color back through. So I am going to try to wash it out very well. I just might skip the extra redundancies that sometimes I do. So I'm going to get this switched around and I'll bring the camera back when I'm all set up. Alright, I got some water heating up here in the beaker next to me, or off to the left here off screen. And right now I am going to just start spraying this off, and let's open that up a bit here. Let's just wash this all down real well. I'm going to pour this rinse water off and save it. I will be using that for future digestion. It will have a little bit, you see some green color in there, it will have some silver trapped in it, so I don't want to lose that. And I have a 4-liter beaker next to me off camera that I'm going to pour that off into. So we'll give that a few rinses in cold water until our water heats up. Whenever I say water, I mean distilled water. We're always, especially when we're working with any kind of silver, always distilled water. if you introduce tap water, whether it's city water or well water, you never know what's going to be in it. It's definitely going to have chlorine in it if it's city water, and you have no idea what minerals would be in there if you bring out even well water, you know. So always use distilled water. And you see that floaty bits on top? One little tip of getting rid of that is to spray it with the mist. It breaks that surface tension and it allows that stuff to drop temporarily. It can still lift up again, but whenever right before you're going to pour off, you just want to hit that and knock that back. Here we go. You see all that floaty again. Alright, I'm going to pour this off here quick. And again. Strong enough here. Might have to get a bigger one. That'd be alright. Spin it around a little bit here. Definitely still has a slight green hue to it when it comes out of the water. I get to glance at the screen while I'm doing this. The colors are definitely different. Maybe in the video itself it won't be, but definitely still has a slight green hue to the rinse water, and it reflects just a bit within our silver still. I'm gonna pour this off, and that's pretty much all I'm gonna do until this water heats up. Take another quick look at it here. Definitely some beautiful sparkly pieces. Fresh fallen snow. Alright, I'll cut back when the water heats up. Alright, our distilled water is up to about 90 degrees. That's a good start. As I pour it off and work, it'll get hotter. I really want to work and break whatever little clusters that are not whole apart. Those pieces that are touching and bonded, they collect that electrolyte in the little nooks and crannies. So if it isn't one solid piece, I just want to break it apart. Make sure that our fresh rinse water is getting in there. That make you dizzy? Sorry. Alright, I got this silver cell set back up. The potato that I'm using to film this thing shut off on me. It ran out of memory, so I didn't record the last part of our rinse. But I finished rinsing our silver. This is what remains. This silver will still go through our silver cell one more time, so I'm going to set that aside. But in the meantime, I want to set our silver cell back up, so I'll pour in our electrolyte. See, we got a little bit of silver at the bottom. Just wash all this out. It's okay, those silver particles can go right back in there and continue on. So it's definitely starting to retain some color here, so I don't know if we're going to be able to finish the entire batch, but we're going to give it a shot. And then of course when we're done, we'll mix up some fresh electrolyte and run another batch. I had to switch these around. I had them going this way so they fanned away from the middle, but now I got them fanning out because they're actually starting to corrode a little bit. I was afraid rust particles were going to infiltrate our system, so sanded them off and cleaned them, but I didn't sandblast them or anything. So right. Here is our anode basket. We'll let that soak up. This material in the basket and this material right here is all we have remaining in the batch. So we'll see if we can run this through. Alright. Our anode is set up. We are ready to hit the power. Everything looks good. Within a minute or two we should start to see some fresh crystal growth. I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick that up, but alright, that's that. I can already see some new crystals forming, so we'll let this do its thing and I'll check back in when we're ready to harvest. Alright, so I've hit a snag. If you can see, our solution is cloudy. That is because some of this crystal growth grew out to meet the basket, grew through into the holes of the basket, and hit our filter. And it must have just happened, but it was still enough to where when I picked the basket out and the fluid flushed, it dragged a lot of particles with it. So we're just starting to get some decent crystal growth here, and I was really hoping all we have left is what is in our basket, and this little bit here. I was really hoping to make it all the way through. However, we didn't make it, and our solution's shot. So I'm going to pour this off. We're going to wash the silver that we have. We're going to make new electrolyte, and we're going to start a fresh batch, run all the crystal through, and that we have, plus this stuff. Yeah, we're going to make it work. But I was really hoping to start the next round with just pure crystal. But I wanted to, it's a great way to guarantee that everything was purified the first time around, because your solution really doesn't change in color. So, but we're going to have a little bit of color change, because we still have this material, and it is not pure. All right, let me pour this off here. Alright, we'll get this distilled water heated up here. And I'm going to start scraping this off. Alright, we got some hot water ready. Let's start some rinsing here. Alright, now if this was going to be put away, either for future use or for sale, I would have to proceed with the washing a little bit longer, but I'm going to stop at this point here. I may give it one more off camera, but I'm basically going to stop right here and then dry this and prepare it to go back into the silver cell for one more cycle. And next up, I think we better make some fresh electrolyte. We'll come back when it's all set up. We're all set up. We're going to make a fresh batch of electrolyte. I'm going to turn the heat on. Here. We're going to start warming our distilled water. We're going to make a fresh batch of electrolyte. This is our used electrolyte. I added to it. I had some left over from a previous batch. So we're just going to drop the silver out of this solution while we dissolve silver into this solution. So this is heating up. What I have here is 187.5 grams of crystal silver. This is the last batch of silver that I ran through a previous refine. So it's a good test to determine whether this only went through once. It didn't go through twice. So it's a good test to determine how well the procedure went and the purity of it. If when we're done, this is going to change colors as the reaction occurs, but when we're done, we should have still a nice clear solution. And if it is tinged towards this color, we obviously can tell that there were impurities. So I'm just going to pour this in right away here. And what I'm doing is I want to make 1.5 liters of electrolyte, and I want 125 grams per liter of silver in our electrolyte for this batch. So we're going to heat that up. We're going to add some nitric acid. I have 150 mLs of nitric acid here in this beaker. And if it takes more to dissolve the silver than this, then I'll add that incrementally. Right now, our distilled water is cold. I'm not a big fear of a huge reaction. So I just put a good, probably 50 mLs in there. And we'll let that start to work as the solution heats up. All right, and then over here, we have our spent electrolyte. We're going to make this real simple. We're just going to drop some used copper into the electrolyte, and fairly certain we're going to see an immediate response. One more here I'll put in. We'll watch this drop the silver out as we watch this heat up and start to put our silver in solution. All right, it's been about 20 minutes since we put our copper and started into our. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes since I put the copper in the spent electrolyte. So you can see what it's dropped so far. I'm gonna take a temperature check of our fresh electrolyte, and if it's up to temperature or getting close, I'm gonna add a little bit more nitric acid. It's only at about 87 degrees. However, I think we're all right. I think we can add a bit more here. All right, I think I'm going to let these procedures carry on for a little bit. I'm going to cut the camera away, and we'll tune back in with the camera when we need to make adjustments. All right, after about 45 minutes, I took the copper out of our used electrolyte and allowed our silver to settle. You see our solution's quite a bit bluer now that it's so saturated with copper. There's still a bit of silver left in this solution, but I'm going to pull that out in my stock pot. And then you see our new electrolyte solution. The majority of our silver has been dissolved. We have just a few particles down at the base here, and that's it. I've let this sit on with the heat for an hour since the reaction stalled, and it took just a few more particles with it, and that's it. It's pretty much done now. So I have this cooling, and while that's doing that, I think we're going to siphon this. We're going to siphon this fluid off and begin the process of filtering this out while this cools. So I have a siphon hose filled. I'm going to set that down in the front here. And the pot. Now I'll be pulling the remaining. There's not a lot of silver left in this solution, but I'm going to pull out what remains with copper in my stock pot. That copper's good, or that silver, the last little bit comes out generally a bit with a few more contaminants, so I'd rather just collect that all at once. I have 95+% of the silver dropped. Wash the end of the hose, flush it with water, just squirting the water through, flush it out. Hose goes back on the hook. Okay, at this point I'm going to flip a few things around here and get set up. Be right back. Alright, we're basically all set to filter. Get this prepared here. I'm going to add a little distilled water here. If the concentrations of silver are too high, as this solution cools, it can sometimes form crystals, which are easily dissolved back down in water, but I'd rather not deal with that right now. And what we did here is we dissolved enough silver to create electrolyte that was 1,500 units. So we still have more water to add yet. We're going to take this all the way up to 1,500. Or just shy, because I really only need 1,400. But I made enough for 15, so the concentration, just with these, maybe a little gram or two at the bottom here. I don't even know if it's 2 grams, but when you put your distilled water in, you just definitely have to mix it. There is a density difference. Water could just sit on top, so you want to make sure it's stirred well. And you'll notice it's perfectly clear. It's beautiful, pure silver. It's going to make a fantastic electrolyte. Yikes. While this sits and cools, I'm just going to leave that silver in our solution, and if there is any more free nitrates floating around, they'll have a chance to attack it. And I also see little black particle floating around, swirling around in there. I'm not 100% sure what that is. I think it was just a piece of dirt or something that infiltrated my booth here. So either way, I don't know what it is, and I'm going to filter this solution before we pour it into our silver cell. Typically that's not necessary. You know what's in here, but I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but there's that little swirling black dot. I don't know what it is. Whatever it is, it did not dissolve in hot dilute nitrate. Alright, I have a filter all set up in here, and I'm going to start pouring this off now. I think you've seen this procedure a couple times, so I guess I can cut the camera here. I'm going to pour all of this silver into here, make a small cake. Before I do that, I'm gonna rinse it several times. I'm gonna wash it with hot distilled water, and we'll get that all cleaned out when it's ready. That'll be turned into shot as well, and then added at the very end of our silver cell project here. The silver that we're running right now is for a customer, so I want to make sure that all of their stuff is into the system, filtered, purified, and removed, and then I'll add this extra shot. And I'll have crystal for next time when I want to make an electrolyte. All right, see you in a bit.